All right, and good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining our webinar today, having the college cost conversation with students and families. For those of you who are new to MEFA, we are the not-for-profit state authority created in 1982, helping families plan, save, and pay for college. Our public purpose mission, our mission is focused on helping families access and afford a higher education. And we do this through a variety of initiatives, all falling within the planning, saving, and pay areas of focus. We do work a lot with families, keeping them on track with free college planning resources directly through our website, MEFA.org. We have information, tools, and resources on a host of college planning, saving, and financing topics. Anyone can call us at any point. We have a customer service team that's ready to answer questions. Right now, we're answering a lot of questions about the FAFSA and the CSS profile, and so we take direct calls and we engage with families directly, and obviously any one of you that have any questions. You can reach us at collegeplanning@mefa.org. We have a social media presence, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We also have emails, an email campaign that we go out to families with. Folks can sign up by visiting mefa.org. We send out timely email information to families as they are going through the process. And then also we have an email communication stream for all of you for any folks that want to take advantage of those resources. We do family seminars. Many of you know about these. For more details on all of those, mefa.org/events. And then we do these family and counselor webinars, which obviously you are on the counselor webinar, the counselor webinar track. We have a family webinar track as well. So as I mentioned, my name is Jonathan Sparling. I serve as an Associate Director of College Planning and Education here at MEFA. I've been with MEFA since 2018. Before that, I worked at another national non-for-profit, helping engage with families and students about the college planning process, as well as teaching a lot about financial education, financial literacy. And before that, I spent some time working in a financial aid office at Worcester Polytech Institute. And so I'll kind of loop in some of that experience at both those former employers as we're going through this presentation. And a topic that I think is becoming even more and more important, and something that as counselors you are probably confronted with more and more than you probably thought you ever might be. You know, having this college cost conversation and some of the impact that that can have, and the realistic realities that are facing our students and families. So our agenda today, I don't plan on taking the entire hour. We'll start with a brief background of college expenses and just kind of level set what we're looking at when it comes to college costs and kind of where we're starting at. We'll then go through an overview of college expenses, so high-level overview of those different college expense categories, many of which you are probably familiar with in your work. And then we'll dive into having the college cost conversation, tips for speaking with students and families as you are going through the process, and then resources for researching costs. So to start, just a little bit of a background, and again, some of this or a lot of this might not be all that new to you. As you are in your work, you're probably seeing this and you might even be reading about it. But each year the College Board does a Trends in College Pricing report, and they report on a variety of different topics. Obviously one of them being looking at the published tuition and fees by sector. And so when we say by sector, we mean public two-year colleges, public four-year colleges, and then private not-for-profit four-year colleges. And so you can see this chart goes back from 1988 to 89, all the way up until 2018, 2019. But in particular, if you look at the segment of 2008-9 to 18-19, the average published tuition and fee prices rose by about $930 in 2018 dollars at public two-year colleges, by about $2,600 at public four-year institutions, and by about $7,400 or $7,390 at private not-for-profit four-year colleges and universities. Again, this is reporting in 2018 dollars, so the dollar amount might look a little bit different, but again, looking at the 2018 dollars here. And so, kind of breaking that down a little bit further, looking particularly at published and net prices at four-year colleges. In 1819, full-time in-state students at public four-year colleges were asked to cover an average of about $14,900 in tuition fees, room and board, after grant aid and tax benefits, in addition to paying for books and supplies and other living expenses. And you can see and we all have heard this and we see that, but as the cost has gone up, obviously the burden has not been fully offset by the increase in grants and scholarships. And so on average, we are seeing that, in-state four-year public schools, students are covering or asked to cover roughly 15,000 tuition fees, room and board, after grant aid and taxes have been applied. And that other talking point down below is just kind of what we captured before as well. If we look at published and net prices at private nonprofit colleges, you can see that it's a little bit higher. And so in 2018-19, full-time students at private non-for-profit four-year colleges must cover an average of about $27,300 in tuition fees, room and board, after granted and tax benefits, in addition to paying for books and supplies and other living expenses. So again, kind of capturing what the first slide did, but just showing that at your public 4 years for in-state students, looking at about $15,000 on average that students and families are asking to cover. That's per year. And at your privates, you're looking at about $27,300 that on average that students and families are asked to cover. So again, with averages, obviously, there's some that are falling below, there's others that are falling above. But the reason that we start with these few slides and these few data points is to just affirm, which many of us already know. Students and families are being asked to cover a lot more when it comes to the cost of education, both at the public 4 years as well as the private colleges. We didn't show the community colleges, that's increased slightly, but not a ton. So students and families are asking or being asked to take on more of the financial burden. And as a result, we are seeing kind of an increase in some of the borrowing that's happening. We're also seeing an increase in what I think is actually a good thing, as students and families are starting to, I guess, broaden their horizons when it comes to thinking about where is the best college fit. And so for many years, it wasn't necessarily just about the cost. It was more focused on an academic and a social and cultural fit. All still very important, but we see more and more that the financial piece, the financial fit, is very, very top of mind for students and families. And this is certainly something that I saw working in my time in financial aid, even in the progression of years from the time that I started until the time that I ended, more and more of a focus on the financial fit, which obviously is a good thing. But for all of you and your jobs, the result is it's becoming more on the forefront in some of the conversations that you might be having with students and families, in particular students. So let's review or go over an overview of college expenses. And I don't see any questions right now, but if you do have any that come up, certainly feel free to put them into that chat panel. And like I said, I will do my best to answer those throughout, and then we'll also have some time in the end. So let's talk about an overview of college expenses, and some of these will be review for each of you, especially if you've been working with students for some time, or if you recently went through the college going process yourself. You know that these are the expenses typically faced by students and families. So primary categories, and all of these capture or encapsulate the total expenses for 1 year of college, commonly referred to as the cost of attendance. So on the billed or direct expenses, we have tuition and fees and room and board. And then on the non-billed or indirect expenses, we have books and supplies, transportation, and personal expenses. Now, each college might break these down a little bit differently, but you will pretty consistently see tuition and fees, room and board as billed or direct expenses across all colleges and universities, and then most do have an expense category for books and supplies, personal expenses. Transportation sometimes gets looped into personal expenses, but it really does depend on the particular college or university. But these are kind of the 5 primary categories that we see traditionally across a lot of colleges and universities when it comes to expenses. So let's talk about these a little bit more. So on those billed or direct expenses, tuition and fees, so this is the price paid for taking classes, obviously. The amount can change based on the academic program, the number of credit hours, whether the student is in-state or out-of-state. There's a lot of fluctuation in what tuition will look like. Again, some of it based on the previous stated items that we outlined. But if for a student that is planning to attend full-time and take whatever number of classes that might be per semester, let's say it's 5 classes per semester, 5 in fall, 5 in spring, they will pay that published kind of tuition price, whatever that might be at the college or university. Now, because there is a lot of fluctuation, colleges do a breakdown of what the different tuition prices might be based on reduction of credit hours, based on particular academic programs. Some might be a little bit more expensive than others. And the big one, obviously, is whether student is in-state or out-of-state. So as you know, out-of-state students that are attending public universities, Massachusetts students who are attending a public university out-of-state will pay the out-of-state rate. Now, there are some programs out there that are offering in-state tuition to out-of-state residents. UMaine is obviously a popular one. I'm sure you've seen the advertisement on the Mass Pike. So there are some that are doing that and making exemptions, but traditionally, if you are a Massachusetts student and you're going to a public university that's outside of the state, you will pay a different tuition rate than students that are in that particular state, as do students coming into Massachusetts. So tuition and fees, obviously, is the big one. At public colleges, it might be a little bit lower on the tuition side, but fees will be higher. At your traditional private colleges, the tuition will obviously be the big cost driver there. The next big expense or billable expense is room and board. Colleges typically offer a variety of residence hall options, and this could impact what the room cost will be. So if you're in a single, double, triple, or quad, also maybe the type of residence hall could impact the room expense as well. And board is an old-fashioned term for meal plan, and the charges vary depending on the chosen plan. So when students and families see, when they get there or when they're perusing on the colleges or university's website and they're looking at those primary expenses, tuition and fees, room and board are going to be kind of the major ones there. And again, these are billed expenses, assuming that the student is living on campus in a residence hall. And those other 3 expense categories, books and supplies, transportation, and personal expenses, these are called indirect or non-billed expenses. And the reason for this is that you are not, or families are not billed for books and supplies. They're not billed for transportation, not billed for personal expenses, but they're built into the cost of attendance. So hopefully students can have scholarship dollars up to that total cost of attendance. But in most cases, students will have to, pay out of pocket or borrow some funds in order to meet any additional expenses. And so the idea of cost of attendance is, let's put everything that we can under this big umbrella of what it might cost, and then we're going to bill the student and family for tuition and fees, room and board, and then for some of these other indirect expenses, they're going to be built into the budget, so you could borrow up against them, you could borrow up to them, or ideally get scholarship dollars up to them, but you won't be billed for those. So books and supplies obviously will vary depending on a number of things, the classes, the major, if the student chooses to buy used textbooks or renting. Transportation obviously will vary greatly depending on how often the student travels, and then personal expenses, kind of everything that comes along with that. So it's important when we're having the college cost conversation to kind of understand, the reality of students and families and what they're being asked to burden on average. That increase about $15,000 for public universities and about $27,300 for private colleges. Understanding the different expense categories, and then kind of moving right into having the college cost conversation. Last year was the first time we did this presentation, this webinar, and I think it's a topic that if you are not familiar with, or you don't feel fully prepared or prepped to have the conversation, it can be a little bit awkward, can be a little bit uncomfortable. It's certainly not something that I'm sure many of you had thought that you might be having for this conversation or in talking with students about this. And this was, I guess, supported by a national study of school counselors conducted by American Student Assistance. And this was in 2018, and what they found was only 55% of counselors had formal training on the financial aid process. And of this group, the majority received this training at a conference or on the job, so kind of learning on the fly, as we do with so many things. But of that 55%, only 26% received training in their bachelor's degree or master's program degree level counseling program on financial aid. And so, we hopefully the longer you work in the field, you feel a little bit more comfortable having these conversations. You know that there are resources that you can turn to. There's folks like MEFA, there's trainings that we do. There are folks in financial aid offices that volunteer their time and are willing to kind of talk about, the entire process and kind of their strategies and what they're doing to talk with families. I know that there is more on financial aid and college financing built into the talk tracks and conferences at professional organizations. And so, what I would say to you is this is hopefully just a primer for you. This starts you thinking about this, but that there are follow-up places that you can go and folks that you can ask to kind of get some guidance and some thoughts about, having these realistic conversations with students and families. So keys to a meaningful conversation. And, in talking with folks here at MEFA and in talking with folks out in the community, we thought that these were, kind of five keys to a real meaningful conversation about college financing and, having the college cost conversation. So the first is framing financial fit as one aspect of the entire college choice. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, we are seeing this more relevant and more top of mind for students and families. A lot of it is by necessity. If you look at kind of what families are expected to pay now and the burden that they are taking on to financing or to put their son or daughter through a college education, when money reaches a certain point, it obviously just becomes more top of mind. So, we encourage framing financial fit as one aspect of the entire college choice. So, as students are going through the admissions process, which obviously that's what they're focusing on first, they're looking at admission, admissibility to a school, they're looking at major, they're looking at location, they're looking at fit, they're looking at the college culture, they're listening to folks, they're reading, they're doing all of these things. Where's the best academic fit? Where's the best social fit? Where do I feel comfortable? What, if location is important to them, kind of all the different factors that go into making a college choice. We would like to kind of frame financial fit as one aspect and really kind of a very, very important aspect of the entire college choice. And so, this manifests itself in a lot of different ways, understanding, how the cost of attendance will vary from college to college, understanding that the published price, the sticker price, if you will, is not necessarily what students and families will pay, that it is discounted by grants and scholarships, and that brings you down to the net price of what you will actually pay. Understanding that financial fit includes also tuition and fees, but all those other miscellaneous expenses that we talked about. And then knowing that financial fit is more than just that 1 year, right? So many students and families kind of get laser focused on getting in, which obviously should be their top priority. But financial fit really is kind of thinking about the entire degree program. So whether it's the entire 2-year, the entire 4-year to public, the entire 4-year to private, at least. And so, keeping that top of mind, that financial fit as part of the entire college choice. The second to a meaningful conversation, recognizing that you do not need to be an expert in college financing to have a meaningful conversation. Some of you, again, on this webinar have been doing this longer than others, and so you have more experience with this. You kind of know the forms. You just know more about the college financing process than others who may just be starting out. But even those who are just starting out, recognizing you do not need to be an expert on college financing to have a meaningful conversation. You can, again, utilize the resources that you have through MEFA. You can utilize the resources that you have through your professional organizations. There's a host of calculators and comparison tools, and we'll show you a few at the end. But know that students are coming to you because you're a trusted resource. And a lot of times, even if you aren't the quote-unquote best person to talk about it, you are the best person to talk about it in that moment, because there's that trust that you've built with those students and families, and they are coming to you because they do trust you. And so you don't need to be an expert on college financing to have a meaningful conversation. And for many of you, going into this third bullet point, you can use your own experience. So, you know, for many of us who borrowed to go to school, and many of us who are who are working now and understand the realities of student loan repayment and what that looks like and the impact that can have on you, you know, using your own experience, I think, can be very beneficial when having conversations with students and families. And, you know, certainly you want to be mindful of your own experience. If you are in a situation where you're maybe struggling a little bit with your student loan repayment, hopefully you're kind of working with your servicer. That's a side note. You're doing that, and you can always call us if you need any help. But just kind of being mindful of your own situation, but using that experience and saying, hey, you know, look, this was a reality for me. This is what I went through, and this is you know, what I'm looking at from a loan repayment place. My experience was great, or, you know, maybe something you wish you would have done. You know, maybe you would have researched that community college path for the associate's degree and then going to public. Maybe you would have broadened your search process or your college application process to make sure that you were giving yourself kind of the most options when it came to finding a really, really affordable option. Or, you know, sharing all the positives as well, sharing, you know, how you cut your expenses to make sure that you were staying on track. You know, what did you do as a college student? Did you find a way to cut costs through, you know, renting textbooks? Or buying used if you could? You know, what were those small cost-saving measures? Did you have a job? You know, did you find outside scholarships? Kind of all of your experiences collectively, I think, can really have a great impact when speaking with students and families about the college cost conversation. Mentioned this a few times, but utilizing expertise and community resources. You have many folks at your disposal. You have folks that do this kind of as I want to say living, but do this more than you do it because you have 100 other things on your plate. And so utilizing those experts and community resources. And then the last is following a rubric or a standard set of questions. And these are, again, some questions that, you know, we put together or we have as a rubric, just as a nice way, if you're coming in fresh or you're looking to kind of rethink your approach to having these conversations, this rubric or set of questions is really a good place to start. So let's talk a little bit more about that. These are 7 financial considerations for students and families. We like to kind of have some, you'll see the slide before was 5 keys to a meaningful conversation. This is 7 financial considerations for students and families. And then 9 things students should think about when it comes to student financial aid is the next slide. So there's some overlap, but I think it's good to have, set, here's what we're looking at, and here's a nice rubric that we can follow. So 7 financial considerations for students and families. The first is family size. And this is more on the parent side, but again, depending on the student-parent relationship, you might be having these conversations with the family. So considering the number of children in the family going to college. Again, we are not asking you to insert yourself into family dynamics, but this is something that families should be considering when it comes to where students are going to school, especially if there is some borrowing involved. And so, what are the realities of the family, and if this is the first student going to college and there's 2 more behind, then they are also planning to go. What does that mean potentially from a cost-saving measure or from a cost reduction measure when you're looking at the college or university that the student is considering? So number 1 is family size, considering the number of children in the family going to college. The second is total enrollment, and I touched on this earlier, but it's something that we hear time and time again, and we see it time and time again, thinking in terms of total enrollment for plus years and what that total debt might look like. So as I mentioned, students, families, laser focused on the first year, not thinking long-term, not thinking about the entire time of enrollment, which in many cases is 4+ years. National average is 6 years when it comes to graduation. So thinking in terms of total enrollment and saying to families, look, if you're sitting down and looking at some financing options or, the realities, and that to attend this school, the student would have to borrow $10,000, that's per year. So you're looking at $40,000 plus interest, at least. So again, framing in terms of total enrollment. The third is monthly loan payment. Considering the post-graduation monthly loan payment, we have a really good slide, I guess, that we do during our college financing presentations, where we say that if students just borrowed the federal loans that were offered, the direct loans, both the sub and the unsub for 4 years, they'd be looking at about $27,000 in debt, and that paid over the course of 10 years, which is the standard repayment plan, would be about $300 a month. And just showing that, saying, okay, if you just borrowed the direct loans and you went into the standard 10-year repayment plan, you'd be looking at about $300 a month in repayment. That just, I think, helps frame and put something real down on paper. And so consistently we'll show that slide, and students and families kind of look and be like, oh, wow, okay, that makes sense. It's something I can grasp and wrap my head around. And then they kind of build from there. So monthly loan repayment, considering the post-graduation monthly payment, even before the student is enrolling in school. The fourth is career earning potential. And so again, you can make all these checklists. So researching potential starting salary for intended careers, Bureau of Labor Statistics has them, it's kind of the old school, but kind of looking at that, looking at, Glassdoor, some of the other ones, pay scale, that look at, if you have a student that's going to be a teacher or wants to be an electrical engineer or wants to be, an airplane pilot. What are those potential starting salaries for the intended career? Now, obviously, we know that folks change majors and they change their minds, and a lot of times you're dealing with 17, 18-year-old kids, but just kind of laying it out, and again, having a plan in place. Graduate school. Is the student considering graduate school? Something when I'm talking with students and families, if the cost to go to the undergraduate program is substantial, then I say to them, look, have you considered some lower cost options on the undergraduate side, knowing that, again, in this scenario, they want to go to graduate school, a lower cost option for the undergrad, but then knowing that when it comes to graduate school, you might be able to, I guess, borrow or take out your savings a little more to pay for that graduate degree. So if they already know they're going to go, a high-cost undergraduate degree and a high-cost graduate degree can sometimes be really, really tough to swing. Current financial situation, again, this is a little more into the weeds, but knowing your credit score if you plan to borrow a private loan. So this is, again, just something to say to families, understanding, do you know your current financial situation, and, how do you feel, if you do have to borrow, comfortable taking on some additional debt, especially when it comes to a private loan. And then finally, the net price. So for those of you not familiar, the net price calculator is a calculator that every school has on their website. And basically what it does is it gives students and families an estimate of what their financial aid might look like if they attend that particular college or university. So it asks for some inputs from the student. Each calculator is going to be a little bit different, and it delivers to you, based on historical data, what you might be looking at when it comes to grants and scholarships from the college, potentially from the federal government, and as a result, what your net price might be at that college. Now, again, it's just a tool. It's just an estimate. It's not something that you can go to the bank with, but but I think it's important to work into this financial consideration. And if it is a school that the student or family is strongly considering, utilize that net price calculator, go out there and see what it says. Okay, and so finally, I won't read through all of these right now, but I will point out a few. When having the college cost conversation, those keys to a meaningful conversation, the 7 financial considerations, you could turn that into a checklist as you're going through and having that. And then, this is on our website. I think it's just a great series of 9 questions that that families and students should know about financial aid. Some of it's overlap, as you will see here, but it does, I believe, capture a lot of really, really good things that students and families should know, and something that they can ask as they're going out on their college visits and they're talking with the financial aid office or even the admissions office about what the school offers and what their financial aid policy is. And so, some of them are basic, but the one I'll point to here, or a few I'll point to, number 5, does the college offer merit-based scholarship, and how do students apply? So as you know, a merit-based scholarship is different from need-based scholarship. Merit-based is based on the meritorious achievements of the student in high school. And so not every college or university offers merit-based scholarships, but we are seeing an increase that more and more colleges are starting to offer. So if it does, number 1, does the college offer, yes or no? And then if yes, how does the student apply? Are they automatically considered with the admissions process, which is the case for most? Is there a separate application? So kind of understanding how all of that works. Number 7, are scholarships and grants renewable each year? If so, are there conditions such as grade point average, enrollment status, or major that the student must maintain or keep in order to have that scholarship or grant renewed each year? And so this is obviously very, very important when it comes to a sound financial plan for college, knowing that assuming everything stays good and the student stays, maintaining satisfactory academic progress, the enrollment stays the same, knowing which grants and scholarships are renewable each year. But again, a good list here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but it is listed on our website, and I think it does really capture. And we talk to students and families a lot about using this, as I mentioned, even as they're going out on that college planning process and having those tours and just having these questions in your back pocket and saying, oh, does the college offer this, and just kind of being prepared as they do those visits. All right, so before I go on, I just want to see if there are any questions. And I don't see any questions here. So I'm going to finish up with the last section, researching college costs, and then I'll hang on for obviously any questions that you might have after. So researching college costs. Some of you are probably familiar with MEFA Pathway, college and career planning portal, tool that we utilize. We work with several high schools and a few middle schools across the Commonwealth. But as part of MEFA Pathway, we do have a college compare tool. You can compare up to 5 colleges side by side, and it's a really great resource for comparing financial info. I know a lot of the college and career planning systems or portals have their own, but if you are utilizing MEFA Pathway, I encourage you to use it with your students and even with your families. If you're not, and you'd like to just use this, obviously the tool is free. MEFA Pathway is free, so take advantage. And what I like about this is it's kind of breaking down and it's kind of looking at, comparing those colleges side by side, and it's a great place to get and to compare financial information. 2 other places that I really like and that we utilize heavily, College Navigator, collegenavigator.gov. This is a college search. It has admissions, academics, and cost information. It's a comprehensive website that just lists, again, all the information related to admissions, academic, and cost. But if you're looking for a place to go, or families are looking for a place to go, College Navigator is a really good resource and one that I utilize fairly heavily. And then another place is College Scorecard, so collegescorecard.ed.gov. College Scorecard, you'll have college info, what's the average net price, student debt, grad rate, and alumni salary. And so this is I would say more of a consumer-facing site. The idea was to create this site to have more transparency about debt rates, grad rates, and even obviously salaries from alum. And so it's a good site. I'm sure many of you have utilized this. Collegescorecard.ed.gov will get you there. I won't recap this because we already talked about it, but again, those net price calculators, take a look at them. I would encourage you to go out and play around with the net price calculator as well. Colleges really like that when you kind of mess with it. I'm just kidding, but it's good to kind of get a feel for what those look like. And again, every college or university that receives Title IV funding, which is 99.9% of the school that your students are applying to, are required to have a net price calculator on their site. And so again, you may have utilized this as you were a student, and you may have utilized in the past for other students, but go out there and check out those net price calculators. It is a tool. My one last warning here is that, well, two things. Number one, if the net price calculator says that you or a student's going to receive $20,000 in grants and scholarships, and they only get 15 or 10, they can't then take the net price calculator printout and negotiate. It's a tool. It's not a definite. On the flip side, if the student uses the net price calculator and it says it's only going to get them 5,000, and that's not going to get them even close to covering the cost of expenses and what would be realistic for them, don't necessarily cross it off the list of applications where you should be applying, because it is just a tool and it's not set in stone. And so student could apply, be pleasantly surprised as they get their actual financial aid award letter. So lastly, some things to do now. Sign up for MEFA emails if you aren't already. Register for our upcoming webinars. We have MEFA.org/events. We have a few other webinars, different topics than this. You know, any of you who joined us for our past ones, we did a deep dive into the FAFSA, so we did a deep dive into the CSS profile. Both of those are recorded, and so you can go and view those at any time. You can register for an October training. We have two upcoming trainings, October 24th and the 29th. The 24th is at Bentley University, and the 29th is at Mount Holyoke College. These are days where we do a deep dive into the FAFSA and the CSS profile. We have folks from 8 offices come and do a panel, answer any questions that you might have. We'll give you an update on the pathway. We'll have someone from the state of Massachusetts come and talk about some programs through the Office of Student Financial Assistance. It's just a great training day. They're free, obviously, free lunch, free breakfast. And so good way to catch up with colleagues and make sure that you're up to date on all the latest and greatest information that you need to be up to date on. You can watch the recorded webinars, share our resources with families, and then always visit MEFA.org/counselors. You know, that site is, or that place of the website is dedicated to all of you. It's a place that hopefully you will utilize, and if there's something out there that you want, or there's something that we're not giving to you from a resource standpoint, just shoot me an email and say, hey, Jonathan, we'd really like you to share about this. Or if these webinars aren't hitting on topics that you find valuable, if you want something for next year, this year's kind of set, but we can always work on it in the spring. You know, shoot me an email and say, hey, I'd really like a webinar on this, because we're always looking to expand what we offer to you. Connect with us on social, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And then finally, any questions, please reach out, phone, email. You know, we are here to, as I mentioned, work with students and families, but also with all of you, our school counseling partners, as you are navigating this process and talking with students about everything related to financial aid. Also, I will add that if you did like this webinar, we'd love for you to leave us a Google review to hear your feedback. And so you can click on that link and put it in there. Again, hopefully you liked it. And so if you did, then we'd encourage you to head out to Google and leave a review. So that is all that I have. What I'll do right now is I'll hang out. You know, we're at 10:40, so I knew it wasn't going to take the whole hour, which is ideal in my world, and I'm sure ideal in your world. So any questions that folks might have, feel free to send them through the chat panel. Again, about any of the having the college cost conversation with students and families or anything else, I'm happy to take any questions now. If you don't have any questions, thanks for joining. Be on the lookout for an email with a recorded version of this presentation, as well as take advantage of watching any others on playback. So thanks everyone for attending. I'll hang out for another 5 minutes or so, or 5 minutes. If folks have any questions, just feel free to put them through the chat panel. All right. Well, it doesn't look like there's any other questions coming in. So I will go ahead and, again, we will follow up with a recording of the webinar, a link to the recording, as well as the slides. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.